So I'm really happy to be here tonight. Like I said, we're going to dive into how to buy a car. A lot of the legislation that I will be referencing this evening is Ontario based, but the legislation that I'm speaking to is basically Canada wide. So each respective province has its own variation of the legislation that I will be referring to today. So for those of you who might be, in British Columbia, perhaps Alberta, there are comparable organizations in your respective provinces that do provide consumer protection if you do need a resource moving forward. So today we're going to talk about buying a car, what you need to know, the things that you need to consider prior to buying a car, best practice and tips to build your car buying confidence. As you know, it is one of the most expensive purchases that you are going to make in your life. It can feel stressful, sometimes even confusing, and gone are the days of the good old tire kicking between things like technology, financing options, electric versus gas versus hybrid, and the paperwork that you need to understand, in its entirety. It's very easy to feel unsure about what your best options are. So today what we're going to do is we're going to take a deep dive into a practical consumer-focused session that's going to walk us all through the car buying journey here in Ontario, but also across Canada, step by step. So today we're going to talk about what to consider before you buy or lease your next vehicle. It's very important that the education and the information that you gather before your car buying purchase will guide you throughout the remainder of your process. We're going to talk about private purchases versus buying from a dealership. We're also going to talk about negative equity and financing, leasing versus financing, and what makes sense for you. Gas versus electric versus hybrid, what happens at the dealership and when it comes to contracts. We're also going to talk about fraud, how to best protect yourself, and where to go for help if something goes wrong. So whether you're buying your first vehicle or, fifth vehicle, this session is going to help you be more prepared, confident, and informed when going into your next or first car purchase. So a little bit about me. Thank you, Demeric, for the introduction. Just to reiterate, my name is Farah Mohammed. I have 15 years of automotive industry experience. I'm a certification writer and instructor, founder of their Auto Source, which is a car buying advisory firm. I'm the director of media relations and partnerships with Beepzz Canada, the only automotive specific recruitment company in North America and Canada specific. I teach the Automotive Law and Ethics course at Georgian College. I'm a freelance automotive journalist, board member here at the Canadian Automotive Museum, as well as a board member with the Senior Services Network within the GTA. And I specialize in consumer protection, fraud prevention, policy, and compliance. My mandate at the end of the day is to help Canadians buy vehicles safely, confidently, and legally. So let's dive in. How do we become an informed consumer? So first and foremost, if you are considering buying a car, a truck, a motor vehicle in general, you need to first and foremost consider your budget. Now, when I talk about budget, I'm not talking about just the cost of the vehicle that you're looking at. You need to consider any further and other cost associated with the purchase of your vehicle. Costs, for example, for a loan or finance, insurance as well. And insurance will vary from person to person, depending on your vehicle history, depending on where you live, depending on the vehicle that you're also looking at. Parking is another big expense that you're going to want to consider before you decide on the vehicle that you're going to buy. Again, I'm speaking from an Ontario perspective. A lot of individuals have now been mandated to go back to work since the pandemic, and that's increasing parking expenses, right? So for those of you who aren't very well acquainted with those parking expenses, if you know that you're going to be going back to work shortly in the next 6 months, which is why you are buying your next car, you need to consider things like parking as well. We don't want to forget operating expenses either. So consider the expenses to operate your vehicle, what the cost for oil changes and maintenance is going to be for the vehicle. How many kilometers do you drive on a monthly and or annual basis? Are you driving out of province often? Are you, driving more than 100 kilometers on a weekly basis to and from work? You want to consider what your fuel efficiency might be and what the gas mileage might be of that vehicle so that you can calculate your expenses. Similarly, if you're buying an electric vehicle, you're going to want to consider budgetary expenses when it comes to the charging stations. If you don't have if your home is not currently equipped for that, you're going to want to consider reaching out to a certified electrician to come and provide you a quote. And also, you're going to want to consider a warranty. Do you have a warranty? Is it a new vehicle? Does it have the manufacturer's warranty still? Perhaps you're buying a used vehicle and you might want to consider an extended warranty. And that is most definitely if you're considering the longevity of the vehicle that you are purchasing. With a warranty, you can consider the affordability of unexpected repairs. So at the end of the day, when you are purchasing a vehicle, you don't want to just consider the cost of the vehicle itself, but all the other costs associated with the vehicle that you're interested in buying. You're also going to want to do your research, right? So you're researching your budget and you're considering your budgetary expenses. Now you're going to want to research the vehicles that best suit your budget and your exact needs. You're going to want to check competitive ads, whether they be on paper or online. You're going to want to be really, really aware of vehicles that are marketed below market value. So let's say, for example, you're looking at a vehicle and the average selling price of that vehicle is $30,000, but you find a great one on, Kijiji, maybe even Facebook Marketplace, and it's $10,000 less. You think that you've just found a deal. That is actually a red flag. If you find a vehicle that is significantly below market value, you want to consider things like it could be a vehicle that has sustained an accident. There could be something wrong with that vehicle at the end of the day. So when you are reviewing ads, just be aware of the ads that are significantly below market value. Sometimes what advertisers are going to do is they're going to make their price look a lot less, but at the end of the day, when you go in, they're charging you a lot more. So while you're reviewing these competitive ads, they're actually going to be selling you the vehicle for the exact same price at the end of the day, which for dealers is actually an illegal practice, and we're going to get into that very shortly. You're going to want to consider your all-in advertising and advertising rules. In Ontario, when a dealership is advertising a vehicle with a price, they need to adhere to certain advertising rules and regulations. The most important one that you all need to know is the all-in price advertising rules. When a dealer in Ontario advertises a vehicle with a price, that price must include all fees and charges the dealer expects to collect from you, with the exception of HST and licensing. So going back to my example of $30,000, if that advertisement is placed by a dealer and they're advertising a vehicle for $30,000, they can only add HST and licensing on top of the advertised price. If they try to add further and other mandatory charges, walk away, contact the appropriate regulator, and report it. Here in Ontario specifically, I can also speak to some of the other provinces. They do have all-in price advertising rules that specifically dealers, have to adhere to. Unfortunately, private individuals don't have to adhere to that rule. So if you are looking for an ad, you want to ensure that if you're looking at the price and it's by a dealer, it's in compliance with that rule. Whereas if it's a private vehicle being sold by a private individual, they do not have to follow the all-in price advertising rule. There are also other advertising rules that dealerships must follow when they are advertising to the public. You can go onto the Ontario Motor Vehicle Dealers, the OMVIC, Ontario Motor Vehicle Industry Council. They regulate dealers here in Ontario. You can go onto their website for more information on all of the advertising rules and regulations that dealers must adhere to when advertising to the public. But like I said, the one that's most important for everyone here today is the all-in price advertising rule. Again, they can only charge HST and licensing on top of the fee that they're advertising to the public. If you have a trade-in, you want to consider what your trade may be. If you have a vehicle that you currently own and you're considering getting a newer vehicle, whether it be brand spanking new or used, you can use the trade to minimize that cost of your next purchase. At a dealership, the dealership is going to give you the wholesale value of the vehicle that you're trading in. So they're going to take the wholesale value off of your new car purchase. Whereas if you own your vehicle and you'd like to sell it privately, you can sell it privately and get retail dollars from it, and then you can use that money towards your next purchase. So those are the two ways that you can deal with your trade-in if you do have a trade-in that you would like to leverage towards the purchase of your next vehicle. If you're buying a brand spanking new vehicle, you can try to find the dealer cost, which will give you a better negotiation advantage. You can do that through organizations out there like Car Help Canada, for example. There are companies that do sell dealer cost sheets. You do have to pay for these services, of course, but they are out there. So if you are buying new and you do want to leverage your negotiation power, you can utilize one of these companies that do sell the dealer cost for you, and then you can use that when you're negotiating your next new vehicle purchase. And of course, if you're financing, you want to understand your personal credit worthiness at the end of the day as part of your researching. Equifax Canada, for example, TransUnion, you could do a credit check on yourself just to understand what it is you're going into if you are considering to finance your next vehicle. So that's all within the research process. And like I said, when you're researching, you're going to be honing in really hard on the dealerships or, the private sellers advertising. Like I mentioned, in Ontario, if a dealer is selling a car with a price, that price needs to be all in. They can only add HST and licensing at the end of the day. And the reason for that is because the HST and licensing can vary from person to person. Licensing, if you want a customized plate, that price is going to change. If you're taking your old plates and putting them onto your newer car, that price is going to change. So it's very hard for a dealer to be able to determine what the licensing fee may be in order to loop it into that all-in price. Similarly, HST is dependent on the bottom line price. You might want to purchase a further another optional products, services, packages, etc., which will increase the bottom line price at the end of the day. Therefore, the HST might change here and there. So that's why the legislation allows for HST and licensing to be added on top of the advertised price. Now, when you are looking at an advertisement for a car, and it's not from a private seller, you're looking at a new vehicle from a dealership, you want to make sure that you're not mistaking the ad for that's placed by a manufacturer for a dealership. And the reason for that is because manufacturers do not have to adhere to the all-in price advertising rule here in Ontario. In Quebec, however, they do. In Ontario, they do not. So 90% of the time, when you do see a manufacturer advertising prices in Ontario, there will be further and other fees added on top of that on top of the advertised price. So for example, you will see likely an administration fees for freight, PDI, etc., in the manufacturer's fine print. On a dealership's advertisement, that is not allowed. So, a way that you can determine if you're looking at a dealership's ad versus a manufacturer's ad is the website tag. If it's from the manufacturer, you're going to see, Honda.ca or Toyota.ca. The link is going to take you directly to the manufacturer's website. Whereas if you're looking at the dealer's website, it's going to say, Coburg Honda or, Mississauga Toyota. It's going to have the name of the city likely associated with the brand. So that you don't confuse a manufacturer's advertisement for a dealership's, always look at the website because, like I said, manufacturers do not have to adhere to the all-in pricing rule. So that's very important because I know that a lot of folks do end up complaining about the advertisements, not being aware that they're looking at a manufacturer's ad versus a dealership ad. Okay, so we talked about advertising. Now we want to understand financing. Let's say, you are going to finance a vehicle. You really want to understand what your individual creditworthiness is and learn your credit score. So like I mentioned, you can utilize, you can get your credit score through Equifax Canada, TransUnion. There are other companies. You can even go directly to the bank as well. And this is important so that you can compare lenders. You can find the lender that is going to give you as the individual the best rate for you when you're buying your next vehicle. And it's always important that when you do lock in a finance rate, that you review the agreement and get all conditions and promises in writing. Because what's going to happen is you're going to get two separate agreements. The financing terms are going to be on the contract between you and the dealer, but you're also going to get a secondary financing agreement to sign that basically is between you and the financial institution at the end of the day. What happens often is when you're going through financing through a dealership, the dealership has their preferred financial institutions that they are working with. And oftentimes they do receive a kickback for getting more and more financing for that institution. On every contract, if the dealer is getting a kickback, they need to disclose that in writing on the contract. There's even a little checkbox that you'd have to initial that they will get you to initial. But things go so fast that you might miss it and you might just sign without knowing. But they are obliged to let you know that they are receiving some sort of kickback. So when they are shopping around for different financial institutions for you, sometimes they will try to sell you the institution that's going to give them the kickback. They shouldn't at the end of the day. They should present you with the best offer for you, but they don't always do that, unfortunately, which is why it's important that you as the purchaser are aware of what your credit score is and what the various different lenders will provide you. Similarly, when you're considering financing, you want to consider what you've already got. So let's say you currently own a vehicle and you're still making payments on that vehicle, but you want something else. The dealer called you and said, hey, we've got this and we can put you into a brand spanking new 2026 vehicle for the same payment, maybe even $5 more on a month-to-month basis if you trade in your vehicle and go into a new one. Sounds like a great deal, right? Why wouldn't you want to pay only $5 more a month and get a brand new vehicle? What they don't tell you is that the remaining balance of the loan that you already have is going to be added to the new vehicle purchase. What it does is it extends the term of your loan. At the end of the day, you're paying more for what the vehicle is actually worth. That's not what you want. That's what we call negative equity. Negative equity is when they take the remaining balance of your current loan or car loan and put it onto the new loan that you're going to be taking. So it does seem like your payments are less, but the term is stretched out for a longer period as well. By the time your term is over, because of depreciation, the vehicle does depreciate significantly and you end up paying more than what the vehicle is actually worth at the end of your term. So before you agree on, extended term loans through negative equity, you want to make sure that you educate yourself and consider things like how much do you drive? How long do you intend on keeping the vehicle, right? So if you sign on to an 8-year loan, but you only intend on keeping the vehicle for 5, what happens to the remaining 3 years, right? How quickly will the vehicle depreciate that you're looking to purchase? And be aware of the potential long-term dangers that lie ahead, right? So it's really important that you understand the remaining balance on the current vehicle that you do have. And if presented with this, shiny, bright new offer that's only $5 more a month, understand the long-term obligation that you do have at the end of the day. If you're considering leasing, I get this question all the time. What's the difference between financing and leasing? Should I finance? Should I lease? At the end of the day, if you're leasing a vehicle, the vehicle is not owned by you. It stays in the leasing company's name. It's like I said, it's basically a long-term car rental because you don't actually own the vehicle and you have to return it at the end of the day or buy it out. It's for a specific durations. Typically, we see leases for, 2 years to 4 years, and the interest rates are a lot less when you're looking at lease rates. The monthly payments are also less as well. When a lease is complete or done, you will typically return the vehicle and pay end of lease costs that you have agreed to on your lease contract when you sign the lease contract, of course. And you may be presented with an opportunity to buy the vehicle for the amount that is stipulated in the contract as well. So that's typically what happens when a lease is complete, right? You've seen the contract from start to finish. But then there's also considerations when you have a lease and you need to get out of it. It's really hard at the end of the day because you've signed a binding agreement for that specific term. So what happens if you want to get out of your lease before that term is over? There are lease takeover companies out there. There's an organization called Lease Busters, for example, and what they do is they sell the remaining balances of leases for you. So if you are looking to have someone take over one more year until your lease is up, Lease Busters or other companies similar to them will help you out there. But basically, you're finding someone to take over your contract at the end of the day, which is quite tough. So if you are considering leasing, you want to consider things like if your situation may change soon. Let's say your situation is going to change and you're going to be moving out of the country, out of Canada completely in the next year or so. You might not want to sign for a 48-month lease because you know that you're not going to be here for a permanent amount of time. Again, like I said, because it's going to be really hard to get someone to take over that lease. And you're going to want to also consider the fact that if you drive a lot, are you going to have to pay end of lease payments? So for example, if you exceed the kilometer allowance that you agreed to on your contract, you're then going to have to pay at the end of your lease term because you exceeded what you had agreed upon. If you return the vehicle and it's got, bumps, bruises, scratches, a lot of body work that needs to be done, you are responsible to have to pay for that at the end of the lease term. So if you are considering leasing because, it's a lesser payment for a lesser amount of time, just make sure that leasing is suitable for your lifestyle and consider where you're going to be in the next 2 to 4 years before signing a 2 to 4 year term. Now we're going to talk about buying from a dealer versus buying privately. I know that I mentioned that at the beginning of this presentation, but it's really important that you're aware that when you are buying privately, the consumer protection laws that we're about to get into heavily do not apply. They only apply if you purchase through a business or through a registered dealer, specifically here in Ontario. So like I said, the consumer protection laws only apply if you purchase or if you lease from a registered dealership. If you purchase privately, unfortunately, the consumer protection laws don't apply, and any recourse would have to be done through small claims court on your own. So there are benefits to buying from a registered dealer, of course, but I'm not here to knock buying privately. I've bought my fair share of vehicles privately. And so long as you are heading into it informed and you know exactly what you want, you can most definitely buy a vehicle privately, and confidently as well. So let's start with dealers. Okay. Most of you are going to be looking at a dealership to buy your next vehicle. You want to make sure that they're registered because, you've got your franchise dealerships that represent the big brands, your Honda, your OEMs basically at the end of the day. Or you've got your independent dealerships that sell used vehicles and, they're fine to work with. They are regulated. They have to be registered just like the other dealerships. Um, so you can buy through them. But if you are going to be purchasing from a dealership, my advice to you would be to ensure that they're registered first and foremost. You can go onto the Ontario Motor Vehicle Industry Council's website. They have a little Find a Dealer tab. You can type in the salesperson's name and or the dealership's name to ensure that they are in fact registered. If they aren't registered, that might be a red flag. You can also give ONVIC a call toll free at 800-943-6002, and they can confirm if the dealer that you're dealing with is in fact registered or not. If you have a different language that you'd like to utilize, they do have translation services in more than 150 different languages that you can get your questions answered. So they are a very good resource when trying to determine if a dealer is registered or not. Any consumer is allowed to ask a salesperson or a dealer to see or their registration number so that they can verify through ONVIC's website that they are in fact registered. So if you are going to be purchasing from a dealership, ensure that they're registered so that you know that those consumer protection laws apply to your purchase. If you're buying privately, you can purchase, like I mentioned, a very reliable vehicle privately. I've purchased my share of vehicles over my time privately, and they lasted me more than a decade. However, because consumer protection laws don't apply, you need to protect yourself by asking the right questions and noticing the warning signs. Okay, so if you're looking at a private seller, let's say you're on Kijiji, Facebook Marketplace, you find a vehicle, my number one piece of advice to you all is do not go alone when you are looking for a vehicle, whether it be from a dealership or from a private individual. Never go alone. Always bring someone with you, someone to verify your story and just to be that additional form of protection. Specifically when you're buying privately, always, always, always bring someone with you, especially when you're going to see that vehicle. You want to ask the person selling the vehicle how long they owned it. Do they have maintenance records? Why are they selling the vehicle? Sometimes you get the standard, oh, I just got divorced or my child moved overseas and I'm selling this. There are standard stories out there that they will give you. So you want to make sure that their story is consistent when you're asking these questions. Ask to see their ID and compare it to the ownership and make sure that the names match. It's really important. If the names aren't matching, who is this person that you're dealing with, right? Like whose vehicle are they trying to sell at the end of the day? That should be another warning sign for you. Take the vehicle on a thorough test drive. Even if the person says, no, you're just allowed to take it around the block, you need to take it for a thorough test drive on highway speed so that you can feel out any inconsistencies in that vehicle. If you're purchasing privately, you're going to have to purchase a history report on your own through Carfax Canada. They average around $30 for a history report, but that's going to give you a really, really good idea of the vehicle's past use history and condition that you are considering. And every seller who is selling a private vehicle must provide you with a used vehicle information package here in Ontario through Service Ontario, so through the Ministry of Transportation. All vehicles have them, but the seller is obligated to provide that to you when they are selling you the vehicle. Something to look out for is when is providing you with the used vehicle information package, ensure that all pages are included. So if they are giving you, and it says one of 5 page and page 3 is missing, what information are they trying to hide? I literally had someone call me today and they noted that the individual who sold them their vehicle left out a page of the used vehicle information package that had very pertinent information about the past use history and condition of that vehicle. So make sure that if they're even if they're providing you with a Carfax, that all the pages are included as well. Ensure that there's no liens on the vehicle. The information is usually available on the used vehicle information package or the history report. You can bring along a trusted mechanic before you purchase the vehicle, or ask the seller if you could take the vehicle to your mechanic. They don't always allow that, and that's just for security purposes, of course. But bring someone along who is very well versed in this stuff with you. And always request a receipt when you are purchasing a vehicle from a private individual, and ensure that all money that you have spent is reflected on that receipt. Even if they say, no, we'll just bring it down and say that it's $10,000 when you actually paid $15,000, so that you get a break on the taxes. Because at the end of the day, if you have to take them through small claims court, the receipt's only going to show less that $5,000, and you're SOL when it comes to that $5,000. So when you're buying privately, make sure that all the funds that you pay are documented on that receipt. And it's very important that if you are buying privately or from a dealer, that you are aware of what a curbsider is. A curbsider is an illegal, unlicensed dealer. So they're identifying themselves as a dealership, but they have no license to operate in such capacity. They often pose as private sellers, or they're selling vehicles from like a small mechanic or body shop without the benefit of registration or licensing. So always be aware of curbsiders. They're selling vehicles that are just not safe to be driven on the road. Often they're rebuilt write-offs with significant undisclosed accident repair histories, rollback odometers, etc. So if you are purchasing from a dealer or privately, just be sure that you're not dealing with a curbsider, okay? And a way to find a curbsider is to determine if you're looking at Facebook Marketplace, for example, Kijiji, when you're looking for a private vehicle, if an individual, a private individual like myself, is posting more than one vehicle, that's an indication that they are a curbsider. They're selling vehicles for a living without the benefit of the appropriate licensing, so that they don't have to follow the rules that the province has mandated. And often the vehicles that they are selling are not just unsafe for the person driving it, but very unsafe for other individuals on the road as well. All right, so I know that I mentioned that we're going to talk about ICE versus electric versus hybrid. ICE is basically the good old cars that we're used to right now, internal combustion engine vehicles. Do I buy, a regular vehicle? Do I buy electric? Do I buy hybrid? At the end of the day, the choice is up to you. It all depends on your lifestyle, where you live. Do you have a charging station, your budget? You need to make all of these considerations before you get into the dealership. But first and foremost, if you are ever considering electric, you want to make sure that if you're getting a charging station installed at your home, that it is a licensed electrician that is doing the work. The Electrical Safety Authority has rules for individuals who are looking for a charging station to be put into their home. You can go to the ESA's website, which I've linked here, for further and other resources on how to best pick an electrician who is equipped to put a charging station into your home. All right, so we talked about your research and what leads you going up to the dealership to purchase your next vehicle or to a private individual. So now we're going to talk about being at the dealership. We gave you tips about, when you're buying privately, what you need to look out for, the questions that you need to ask. What about when you're at the dealership, right? This is where, a lot of individuals get nervous. They get because you're dealing in such a fast-paced sales environment. Take a step back. Take a breath when you're at the dealership. Don't feel rushed. It is the culture at the dealership to sell and sell fast, right? My number one piece of advice to you is when you're at the dealership, take a step back and just, take your time. Ensure that the salesperson completely understands your need and that the vehicle is fit for your individual and or family use. So if you, let's say, go into a dealership and you say, I am looking for a vehicle that is going to accommodate my family of five, including two car seats. And they Homer Simpson you, like in the image here, and find you a sports car, two-seater that's going to suit you because it's going to give them a better commission at the end of the day. If that's the case, walk away. That's not the kind of salesperson that you want to deal with. You want to deal with someone that completely understands the needs of yourself and the vehicle that you need to be driving on a daily basis. Similar to purchasing a vehicle privately, you're going to want to take these vehicles on a thorough test drive. Take it on highway speeds. They most definitely let you. On days like this, on snow days, this is my time to shine when it comes to test drives because that's what I want to do. I want to test drive the vehicle that I might be looking at in severe weather conditions like this. Only agree to pay for optional products or services that you want and believe have value. This is where the pressure starts, right? This is where, you're in the business manager's office and they're like, we'll sell you this extended warranty in this rust protection package and you name it, and you just feel pressured. And at the end of the day, you just purchase $5,000 worth of products and services that you don't even want or care for. So if you're presented with additional products or services that are optional, ask them if you can consider coming back and purchasing those at another time, right? Don't feel pressured. It's your money at the end of the day that you are spending. Don't let those pressures pressure you into buying a product or service that has absolutely no value to you. If you're buying a used vehicle, ask for a history report. 90% of the time, the dealer provides you with a history report that is up to date. If they're not going to provide it to you, ask for one. If they don't provide it to you, because it's not mandatory that they give you the actual report, you then want to purchase one on your own. And always, always, always consider an inspection, particularly if the vehicle is out of warranty. Most franchise dealers already have the vehicles inspected. If you're buying it from more of an independent dealer, you can ask if you could take it to be inspected or if they can have it inspected. And ensure that you get all of your conditions in writing on the contract before you sign the dotted line to purchase. So let's say, for example, you go in, you see a vehicle, you love this vehicle, but you haven't had a chance to talk to your spouse about it, but you don't want it to slip through your fingers. So you want to buy it. You want to sign right now so that someone else doesn't scoop it up. Subject to spouse's approval, right? That's what you want to put on the contract so that you can go home, speak to your partner, talk to them about the car. Honey, I just went to this dealership. I found this beautiful Mustang. We have a family of five. Take it back, right? If you have subject to spouse's approval on that contract, it will allow you to get out of the contract if your spouse doesn't agree to the terms of the contract. And that's really important because in Ontario, when you do purchase a vehicle through a registered dealer, sales are final. There is no cooling off period, no mandatory, 10-day return policy, 24-hour return policy. Every single contract with a dealership here in Ontario has a similar disclosure statement. All of them have to have the exact same one that basically says, please review the entire contract, including all attached statements before signing. This contract is final and binding once you have signed it, unless the motor vehicle dealer has failed to comply with certain legal obligations. Okay. So here is where a lot of people get themselves in trouble. They think that they're signing and then they can go shop around, find something else at another dealership, cancel this one, and buy the better deal. That's not the case in Ontario specifically when you buy from a dealer. As soon as you sign, that car is yours. Okay, unless you put your conditions in writing, or like the subject line here says, unless the motor vehicle dealer has failed to comply with certain legal obligations. And we're going to get into what those certain legal obligations are. Contracts all have to be signed if the dealer is taking any money from you, okay? If they take money from you and there is absolutely no signed contract, they must return it at any time. Okay, so I am going to talk to you about disclosure of past use, history, and or condition, and cancellation rights when it comes to buying a car from a dealership. Now, a lot of the information about past use and or history pertains to used vehicles, but some of it does pertain to newer vehicles as well. So one of the most important items that a dealer needs to disclose to you before you sign the contract when you are buying a vehicle is if the vehicle has been in an accident. If the vehicle has been in an accident, the dealership needs to tell you about it. And they need to disclose that in writing on the contract very clearly with the exact dollar amount as well. They also need to identify on the contract again if any repairs need to be made to the major components of the vehicle, or if if the vehicle is flood damage. So if there's liquid penetration to the interior floorboards of the vehicle, it's considered flood damage. So what are the major components of a vehicle? You've got your engine, your tranny, powertrain, the computer, the electrical system, fuel system, the AC. If any of the major components need repairs, the dealer needs to tell you about it before you agree to buy them, to buy that vehicle. And the reason for that is because these repairs can be pretty substantial. And anyone who's purchasing a newer vehicle, or it could be used, but it's new to them, is not expecting to pay thousands of dollars in a repair shortly after purchase. So if one of these items does need repairs and the dealer is not going to take that repair on their own, they need to disclose that in writing on the contract. Transmission requires repair, not included. Right? And like I mentioned, if the vehicle has been in flood, liquid penetration to the interior floorboards, that too needs to be disclosed in writing on the contract. If the vehicle was previously registered outside of the province of Ontario in the last 7 years, this too needs to be reported in writing on the contract, and it needs to be disclosed where the vehicle was registered. So if it was registered in Quebec, the dealer needs to identify that as well. And this is important because each province, or even if the vehicle is out of country from the United States, they don't report history as we do here in Ontario. So we can't determine what the true past use history and or condition of the vehicle might be if it's coming from elsewhere. So you're going to want to ensure that that gets put on in writing on the contract. Here I've got a beautiful photo of vehicles that were a result of Hurricane Sandy, actually, from New Jersey in the, I want to say 2014-ish is when Sandy took place. All these vehicles imaged here, the majority of them ended up in Ontario. And, so we saw a lot of cars coming into Ontario that were flood damaged and had to be disclosed that they were from New Jersey. And a lot of consumers were, filing complaints because there were some dealers that were not making these disclosures. So again, really important that if the vehicle is registered outside of province, that is disclosed. If the vehicle was previously used as a taxi, limo, police, or emergency service vehicle, that needs to be disclosed to the purchaser in writing on the contract. Similarly, if the vehicle was previously used as a daily rental and never owned by a private individual between, your purchase. So it went from rental company to dealership directly to you, that daily rental needs to be disclosed to you, not only in writing on the contract, but if they're advertising it on their website or advertising it in general. And this is because in Ontario, rental companies are self-insured. So the way that they insure themselves, the data that is being pulled from insurance companies to identify past use of collisions, for example, for other vehicles, for other insurance companies, aren't the same for the self-insured companies here. So if a vehicle through a rental company was in an accident, their insurance records aren't going to be pulled. They don't collect the same data that the regular insurance companies do. So if you are purchasing an X daily rental, not a problem to purchase an X rental, but the dealership does need to identify that for you. I remember my first car purchase was an X rental, and I had her for 15 years. So I can attest to the fact that, that it's not a bad thing to purchase an X rental, but you do need to be aware of it for sure. And if the vehicle has been branded or declared a total loss by the insurer, that also needs to be disclosed to you in writing on the contract. So sometimes they're branded as irreparable, salvaged, rebuilt, or they don't have any. So the majority of you who have vehicles, if you've got an ownership, you're going to see what the brand is on the top left-hand side of your ownership. It's likely going to say none. It could be a rebuilt vehicle that was previously salvaged, but it was brought up to industry standards to be put back onto the road. And then you've got salvage and irreparable, less likely to be on your radar or on your ownership, but it could be. So at the end of the day, if the vehicle was branded as any of these or declared a total loss in general, the dealership needs to identify that in writing on the contract as well. And odometer readings also. They need to accurately reflect the true distance that the vehicle has traveled on the contract. Now, I do appreciate that this can get pretty tricky, especially when it comes to classic vehicles or vehicles that, the odometer just stopped clocking because you've got so many kilometers on it. There are two statements that if the odometer is not accurate, the dealer needs to substantiate that by an explanation on the contract. And at the end of the day, any material fact that would alter your decision to no longer want that vehicle must be made in writing on the contract, right? So what's a material fact? A material fact to me is any accident. So if, let's say there was a police record on a car and it was $0, right? We see that on Carfax reports all the time. Police report $0. I still want to know about it if I'm purchasing a vehicle. So when I go into a dealership, I ask, is there any Carfax record on this car? That is a material fact for me. Therefore, the dealership needs to find that information out for me. So anything that is material that the dealer is aware of pertinent to the vehicle, they need to disclose in writing on the contract. So like I said, even if it's a $0 accident, me as a consumer, I want an explanation before I agree to buy that, right? So here, Carfax claim $0, police report on March 27, 2021. Now, I did mention that sales final clause, unless the dealer fails to abide certain legal obligations. So in Ontario, if a dealer fails to identify one of these 6 items in writing on the contract when you buy the car, within 90 days, you can return the vehicle if they don't list one of these and it's applicable to your vehicle, of course. You have 90 days to take the vehicle back and get a full pop refund. What are those items? If the vehicle was previously used as a taxi, limo, police, or emergency service vehicle and they don't identify that on the contract, you can cancel. If they don't disclose that it was previously used as a daily rental, not subsequently owned by someone other than a dealer, that allows for cancellation. If they don't include or include it incorrectly, the make, model, and model year of the vehicle, that also allows for cancellation. If the vehicle has been branded through the insurer and the brand is not included on the contract, that will allow for cancellation. And if there's any mileage discrepancies and there's not an explanation to further explain why that is, that too will allow for cancellation. Now, for full refund. If it goes beyond that 90 days, let's say you find out this information on, day 100 of your vehicle purchase, the Consumer Protections Act does allow for an individual for a period of up to 1 year to return a vehicle, but the dealer can deduct from the refund for usage, right? So let's say you put 15,000 kilometers on the vehicle in that time, they can deduct it for fair market value of the vehicle. Okay, so at the end of the day, you have learned today about how to buy a car, how to research a car, your budgetary considerations when you do choose to buy. We talked about how to review your advertisements. We talked about all-in price advertising being the law here in Ontario for dealers. We talked about buying privately versus buying from a dealer and how you can best protect yourself. But what about the resources? Who do you go to at the end of the day if you have any questions about your next car purchase? You don't want to go directly to the dealer because they're going to want to try to sell something to you. Who do you go to? You can always reach out to myself, Farah, at theirautosource@gmail.com. Happy to provide you with any advice. You can contact the Used Car Dealers Association, otherwise known as the UCDA. They provide mediation services and consumer protection advice as well. So let's say there's a problem between you and the dealership that you purchased from, the UCDA can most definitely help you out. You've got OMVIC, the Ontario Motor Vehicle Industry Council. They also provide mediation services if the dealer has failed to comply with the Motor Vehicle Dealers Act or Consumer Protections Act. They have translation services in more than 150 different languages, and they do provide free advice and have a multitude of resources available on their website to coach you through your next purchase as well. If you're looking to buy an electric vehicle, the Electric Safety Authority has information on their website, especially as it pertains to legally installing a charging station at your home. And Consumer Protection Ontario, or CPO, is a website that you can go to for further and other resources on, if you are looking for, let's say, a body shop, or if you're just looking for other information on other organizations that might be able to help you through the process. So like I mentioned, just to recap, when you're buying from a dealer, you're protected by consumer protection legislation. If you're buying privately, unfortunately, you're on your own, but you can still buy a vehicle privately so long as you go into it confidently and you ask the right questions. Buying privately is totally okay. Like I said, I've bought my share of private vehicles over my time and have had no problems. Curbsiders, however, pose a very real threat and often pose as private sellers. So if you are buying privately, make sure you're not dealing with a curbsider because they are likely trying to scam you. All-in price advertising is the law here in Ontario. Sales are final when you buy from a registered dealer. You want to make sure that you get all your conditions in writing if you want to cancel the contract or if you want to get out of a contract. Otherwise, sales are final here in Ontario when you buy from a registered dealer. And dealers must disclose in writing on a contract before you agree to sign all the information about a vehicle's past use history and or condition before you buy so that you're aware of what you're getting yourself into. That's all I have for you folks today. I do thank you for your time and patience. I will open the floor for any questions. Demeric, over to you.
Well, thanks so much, Farah. That was extremely educational. What an excellent resource. I'm gonna start things off. I'm seeing some great questions, but I've been asked to put it out into the world. For those of you listeners in the Durham region, if you're looking to research a new car purchase, the Durham Public Library System has subscriptions to Consumer Reports. So if you have a Durham Public Library card, you can go onto their online resources and get up-to-date car reviews and research information. But I wanted to turn this into a question. Farah, what would you recommend as resources for people looking to research, what brand of car or what type of car is right for them?
I would, I mean, the Canadian International Auto Show is just around the corner. I would highly recommend going out to the shows and actually seeing and feeling the vehicles. Something really cool about the auto show this year is that most of the vehicles that are being displayed are available for test drive indoors, which is really cool. So you guys don't have to, put your parkas on and go for a test drive. You can actually do it at the show. Auto shows are probably your best resource because you can get the feel and the touch of the cars. Otherwise, I would recommend that you go onto online forums when it comes to the particular vehicles of interest. But I highly, highly recommend going out to the Canadian International Auto Show. It's a lot of ground to cover, don't get me wrong, but you can open up I'm a stickler for trunk space, right? So I'm at the auto show. I'm that girl that's opening up the trunk and asking the questions. And you can spend a lot of time with the professionals who are there, and they are, subject matter experts when it comes to the particular brands.
I would be remiss of me to not subtly mention that you could also swing by the Canadian Automotive Museum booth at the auto show, that we are not offering test drives
Yes.
of Lester Pearson's limousine or our 1908 McLaughlin Model F. But this does
Unfortunately not,
segue.
but you could take a picture in front of it.
Yeah, yeah. Lindsay's asking if you've got any advice about online sales sites like Clutch or AutoTrader.
Clutch or Auto Trader, I mean, they're very, very reputable organizations. Clutch is a really cool new business model trickling from the US over here. They actually have a cool business model because it's my understanding that they do give you a cancellation period or a cooling off period, because what happens is the vehicles are basically delivered to your doorstep. You purchase, everything's done online, so you're not doing the traditional test drive. So when you are purchasing through, something like Clutch, I would recommend that you whatever you do is what that window is for cancellation. Take the vehicle for a test drive during that period. Take it to your mechanic to have it inspected and so on, so that if you're within that window and you're not pleased, you can always return the vehicle. And then also Auto Trader, you've got a plethora of dealers and or private sellers. They have to abide by the rules of Auto Trader, and dealers have to abide by OMBIC. So anything out there to the online universe, if it's tagged to a dealership, it should be compliant. If not, either deal with another dealer. You can call OMBIC to complain, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to result in you getting a better deal. They'll just take it up administratively with the dealer.
We've had a couple lease related questions. Beth's asking if you're at the end of your lease with no excess kilometers or damage, can you just return the vehicle without additional costs?
It all depends on what your contract says. If that's what your contract suggests, then yes. Like typically, the traditional lease model is you return the vehicle, and you carry on, and they can now lease it off to someone else. But sometimes they do have a specific dollar amount that you agree upon. So really, before you go to the dealership to return it, thoroughly go through that lease agreement to ensure that you're aware of what to expect when returning it.
Mhm. On a related note, Lindsay's asking if you want to sell the remainder of your lease through a company, what can they charge you for their service? And do they also charge for the inspection of the car itself?
I believe so. I believe it all depends on the company, but the bigger ones will charge for it because it's a vehicle that they're trying to back up. It's not from them. They're not, the lease isn't in their name, so they do need to make sure that and they wouldn't foot the bill for that. It would be up to you. Like I mentioned, I know I didn't reference it here in the slide deck, but you could go to the Lease Busters website and they have a lot of information to talk you through your lease.
Jeff's asking if you could comment on the Ontario safety cert required to transfer ownership, and anything he's asking specifically about the limitations of the inspection, things that are not covered in the inspection that could require expensive repairs after purchase.
So when it comes to the safety standards requirement, the province did make some significant changes. So if it's being sold by a dealer, they need to adhere to the safety standard requirements, no problem. If it's a private individual, it's a little harder to determine if they're going to be compliant or not, which is why I suggested that you take the vehicle to be inspected before you purchase it. Any dealer who is selling a vehicle to to an individual, they have to sell it with a legitimate safety. If they're not selling a vehicle with a safety, they need to sell it as is, or what they call unfit. So it's basically, it can be driven on the road, but the purchaser is basically having to foot the bill for the safety. But the majority of vehicles that dealers sell, unless you're buying a vehicle for parts or you're a mechanic yourself, they are going to sell with the current safety standard requirements. And what they have to do is any dealership that is using a service department or like another shop, it has to be a registered motor vehicle inspection station that is providing the safeties. The Ministry of Transportation has a list of all registered motor vehicle inspection stations across the province. So if you are looking for someone to provide you with a legitimate safety, go to the MTO's website and you'll find a list there.
Harshvardhan's asking a great question. He says he's buying his car for the first time, he has no idea what he's looking for at all. If you had to recommend a vehicle, an SUV for under 20,000 Canadian, any recommendations spring to mind?
Okay, so an SUV under $20,000, you're in Canada, this is your first purchase. I'm going to say you're going to look at a used vehicle first and foremost, and I am going to suggest perhaps a CRV or a RAV4. I mean, the engines are a little bit smaller. They're quite common vehicles. You can get parts for them, no problem. They're brands that, are built to last. Those are the vehicles that I would recommend from a used perspective. So you're going to look at some vehicles that are likely, a lot, probably older, looking maybe at a 2020, I'm thinking.
I can't help but be reminded of a research trip to Cambridge, where, of course, they build the RAV4 and parking in the city archives and realizing that I was parking my RAV4 in a parking lot of 20 other RAV4s. They're pretty common here.
Yes.
So Tanya's asking, she was able to get a friends and family discount on a new vehicle. Because there was a discount, would that then allow the dealer to add extra fees on things like freight and air tax?
Because the friends and family discount is not advertised to the public, likely so, right? Because they weren't advertising the friends and family price, and it's not available to the majority of folks out there. So it was likely a private deal, like a private promotion. So the all-in price advertising rule would not necessarily apply because the price has now changed for that individual.
Okay. Well, we're coming up on 8:10. I think we can wrap it up there. Again, if anybody has any other, oh, okay, we've got another coming in. Ted's asking, if you don't trade your vehicle on another vehicle, you pay more HST. How important is that to consider versus just selling your vehicle?
I mean, it all depends on what the value is that they're providing you with at the end of the day, right? So let's say the wholesale value is, significantly less than the retail value, you might compensate for the HST there. So it all depends on the vehicle at the end of the day, and what that book value might be. So you might want to go to Canadian Black Book and find out what the wholesale value of your vehicle is, and then use that as leverage to do your calculation.
Okay. Any final thoughts before we wrap up for the night? And again, people, if you've got any last minute questions, put them in a Q&A now. We'll address them by email afterwards.
Like I mentioned, it's one of your biggest purchases that you're going to make. A lot of folks are, foregoing buying homes now, and they're just going straight to cars and renting their places to live. My advice would be if you're buying electric, make sure that the infrastructure around you is in place, especially if you visit other places often. So, for example, if you go to the cottage often and you know that the infrastructure isn't available in cottage country, maybe electric isn't right for you. Maybe you want to consider a plug-in hybrid, for example. But when you are considering electric, consider the infrastructure associated with it and consider your lifestyle and your day-to-day, and if it actually is suitable for that. I've got a lot of people that are kicking themselves because they're like, I bought an electric vehicle, but I don't have time to sit there and wait for a charge, etc. So just make sure that it's suitable for your lifestyle at the end of the day.